Sometimes the road back to yourself begins in a place so quiet you can hear your heartbeat negotiating with the wind. Sterling Wade rolled his rattling sedan down a quarter-mile of gravel toward a house that leaned the way a tired man leans. Still standing, but only because standing is all he's ever known. 52 years old, divorced and emptied out by a career spent denying strangers in the language of fine print, he stepped into the high Montana light with 2 suitcases and the last of his savings. The porch sighed. Cottonwoods whispered like old witnesses. In the hush, the ranch felt both abandoned and attentive, as if it had been waiting specifically for him to arrive and ask the question he'd avoided for years. What does a man become when there's no one left to perform for? Inside, dust rose in soft spirals, a bookshelf of yellowed almanacs, a kitchen that remembered the shape of meals. Upstairs, a warped mattress that would not do. He unrolled a sleeping bag on the living room floor and listened to the silences he used to drown with work. By dusk, a Ford pickup crunched up the drive and an elderly couple, Virgil and Ruth, brought a casserole and the rural truth. Winter is long, and loneliness is longer if you lose the knack for conversation. "You'll need purpose," Virgil said, not unkindly. Sterling nodded like a man who'd come to buy quiet and had accidentally purchased himself a reckoning. Sometimes an answer hides behind the wrong kind of darkness. On the third day, elbows gritty, shoulders burning, he pushed aside rotted hay and caught a blade of light off chrome. A tarp peeled back and time introduced itself. A 1951 Chevy pickup, turquoise once, dignified still, even beneath the rust's slow handwriting. The driver's door groaned open like a theater curtain, bench seat torn. Fuzzy dice yellowed. Registration. Harold Wade, his grandfather. A name his mother avoided like a bruise she'd learned to dress without looking. In the glovebox, a leather journal exhaled 1934. Dust so thick it erased horizon lines. A wife named Mary coughing through midnight. A young father gambling everything on land he hadn't yet seen. The voice on those pages was deliberate and unshowy. A man teaching himself how to stay. He built a house. He raised a barn. He learned engines because money ran out before problems did. Reading in the truck's stale light, Sterling felt a current reach through steel and years and find his pulse. What if this wasn't a relic but a bridge? What if resurrection could be assembled bolt by bolt, not just for a machine, but for a man who'd forgotten the difference between efficiency and living? Sometimes the body understands before the mind agrees. Sterling bought tools he didn't know the names for, watched tutorials until diagrams rearranged into sentences, and learned the first law of old metal. Patience beats force. Virgil appeared the way weather does, without permission, with wisdom. "Let the oil sit overnight," he said when Sterling bloodied his knuckles on a frozen plug. Time loosens what pride tightens. Days fell into a rhythm that felt like prayer. Photograph, label, remove. Clean, measure, replace. Fuel drained the color of regret. Spark plugs came out in a row like little absolutions. On the firewall he found Harold's handwriting. Timing marks in faded paint. A taped map of firing order. A strip of masking tape that read, "Cleaned 51. Evenings he lit a lamp and marched with Harold through years that never made the newspapers. Cattle bought and sold. Winters survived by barter. Dignity purchased with calluses. The work sent truth through his shoulders and into his spine. In Chicago, he'd been a set of passwords and a signature at the bottom of denial letters. Here, the world rewarded what he could hold in his hands. Grief took a seat on a hay bale and waited its turn while he learned the soft click that means a thread has caught right. The whisper a bearing makes when it forgives you. The barn air tasted of solvent and hope. For the first time in years, he slept the sleep of a man who has spent everything he had that day and intends to do it again tomorrow. Sometimes the past doesn't speak. It refuses. In the loft, under a mouse-nibbled blanket, he found a military ammo box full of letters addressed to Harold in a careful, feminine hand. Postmarks from Denver, Seattle, San Francisco. A daughter writing her father for 30 years. Every envelope was sealed. Sterling sat at the kitchen table and opened 1955. "I couldn't stay, Dad. It was killing something inside me." 1956. "Is wanting a future a betrayal?" 1963. Fewer words, harder edges. 1985, I have a son. His name is Sterling. Don't you want to meet him? The refusal lived like ice on the tongue. He understood then the chill that had haunted his mother. The way she rationed affection as if tenderness were a storm you survive by boarding up. In Harold's journal, pride looked almost noble. In these letters, it looked like famine. Sterling texted his own daughter, "Come visit. I want to show you something." The send arrow felt like a lever switching the track beneath a moving train. That night he read until the lamp's heat made the pages smell like toast, then blew it out and lay awake while the house counted his heartbeat against the years. Sometimes a door you thought was locked opens because you finally knock like you mean it. Holly arrived with careful eyes and a guarded smile, expecting a breakdown and finding a man sanded down to grain. They ate Ruth's bread and Sterling told her the truth in the order it deserved. The truck, the journal, the letters no one answered. Holly traced Harold's photograph. New truck, tired smile, a girl in braids who would become Sterling's mother, like a cartographer finding lost coastlines. "So the distance is older than us," she said softly. "Older than Grandma's silence. Older than your late nights at the laptop." They walked to the barn together. The Chevy waited the way a stage waits for the first note. Sterling primed fuel, set the choke, said nothing ceremonial because this was not for spectacle. He turned the key. The starter barked. A cough, a failure, adjustment, another try. The third time, the inline six found its voice. Rough, then steadier, then the low, proud rumble of a machine that intends to work. Holly laughed, bright as the bare bulb swinging above them. Sterling kept a hand on the throttle and let his ribs learn the rhythm. Virgil's truck pulled in, the old man grinning like a witness. Alone can be holy, together is a miracle. The engine idled. Father and daughter listened to the sound of a story deciding to continue. Sometimes truth asks for everything, then hands you back more than it took. Replacing floorboards near the cab mount, Sterling pried up newish nails and lifted a small oilcloth bundle. Inside a second leather journal, 1951-52, Harold's script turned raw. "Mary was pregnant while I worked Wyoming. Not my blood." The words shook the barn. Harold had stayed, raised the child, done the work, and still carried a secret like a stone in his mouth. "I show up, but I can't forgive what I can't forget." Sterling read until sentences blurred. No blood between them. Harold and his daughter. Harold and Sterling, by extension. The story seemed to tilt and then, strangely, right itself. When he told Holly, the room went very still. "So why finish any of this?" she asked, chin lifted against the sting. He found the answer by speaking it. Because he chose to be family anyway. He failed at loving the way she needed, but he didn't run. Choice is a kind of blood. Holly's anger softened into ache. They made a promise at the kitchen table. No more secrets, not between the living. The next morning, they returned to the truck with a new accuracy. Restore the metal, yes, but also repair the sentences they use on each other. Some rebuilds require torque. Some require the gentler strength of apology. Sometimes a town shows up for the part of your life that deserves an audience. Paint day spread through the valley like good gossip. Virgil arrived with the timing light and pride. Wendell from the parts store came with extra lamps and a memory. Harold teaching him carburetors for free. Iris brought coffee and the sentence everyone needed. That truck used to be hope. Holly mixed the vintage turquoise until it looked like water-learning sunlight. Sterling pulled on the respirator. Practiced breath-steadying hand. The first pass laid down soft and even. The second turned promise into presence. The clear coat made the barn itself seem to glow with it. Between coats, they told stories Harold never could finish. A man who gave away his Saturdays to help. Who kept the letters he wouldn't open in a weatherproof box as if saving proof of his own failure might someday help someone else succeed. Under the truck bed rail, Sterling found one last envelope taped tight. To whoever restores my truck. Harold's final confession and instruction. If you can fix this, you can fix things that breathe. Don't wait as long as I did. When the paper trembled in Sterling's hands, Holly steadied it. The engine started clean. The turquoise shone like a second chance you can drive. Laughter rose. Someone turned it into a potluck without asking permission. At sunset, father and daughter sat on the bench seat they'd reupholstered stitch by stitch. The chrome held a small sky. For once, the future did not feel theoretical. Sometimes circles don't close, they widen. They road-tested the Chevy along a 2-lane ribbon where wheat breaks open to horizon, the inline six singing a deep, satisfied vowel. Brakes firm, steering true. At 50, the truck felt both new and entirely itself. They drove south a month later, chasing Harold's shadow back to Oklahoma, sleeping beside county roads under constellations that don't care who left and who stayed. In a small town museum, a volunteer pulled a binder and pointed at photographs of storms that turned noon into evening, young couples loading everything they owned onto flatbeds, faces set to survive. On a granite memorial in the square, Harold and Mary Wade. Holly touched the carving. "He left to save who he could be," she said. "We drove back to understand who he was." The Panhandle wind said amen in its dry voice. Home again. They found the ranch smaller than the sky and big enough for what was next. Holly made plans to move closer. Missoula, maybe Bozeman. Somewhere with coffee and friends and the ability to drive out on a Friday and paint a fender on a Saturday. Sterling began a new notebook. Dates, torque specs, and the sentences he wished someone had left for him years ago. Check your pride like fluid levels. Replace secrecy at the first sign of leak. Idle together often. Sometimes a story asks to keep traveling. 6 months later, the truck carried Holly's boxes toward her new apartment, turquoise bright against a spring that smelled of rain on warm dust. Virgil and Ruth waved from the fence line the way people wave when they mean, "We're here if you need us." In the barn, the old tarp, cleaned and folded, waited for the next storm, the next long absence, the next pair of hands that might need a project strong enough to lift them. Sterling parked and listened to the engine settle like a heart after a run. He looked at his